Mineral supplementation is a key component to that as we look at these conditions.
Steve Paisley with the University of Wyoming is back as my guest as we focus on midsummer nutrition for your cow herd. Now, some of you are dealing with little to no grass, while others have grass, but its quality is quickly declining. So, what are some options?
Also, I think an opportunity to consider early weaning or maybe early preg testing your cows.
The market is good right now. What factors should you consider as you make strategic plans for the coming months, both in cow retention and marketing? Plus, we'll discuss things to consider in heifer selection.
Something that we continue to focus on and need to focus on is feed efficiency and looking at the efficiency of our base cow herd.
It's a good time to be in the cattle business, so tune in as we discuss how you can be strategic and smart as you work through these summer months on this episode of the Working Ranch Radio Show. And we welcome you here to the Working Ranch Radio Show. I'm Justin Mills. Glad to have you here with us on our program today. And I'll tell you what I'm glad for is to be in an air-conditioned studio here doing our program here today. I'll tell you, it's been awfully hot. And for those of us in the northern climate a bit, it's a little abrupt to have multiple days of over 100-degree weather. It is July. Not that we can't have that, or even in August have that, but it's a little abrupt. But I probably really shouldn't be complaining too much, because I know those of you that listen in the south and southwestern part of the country, it's been awfully dry and hot throughout this summer. In fact, the Captain Tim O'Byrne, he's just outside of Las Vegas, Nevada, sent me a picture of his thermometer. Looked like it was in the shade to me. Read 122 degrees. Well, I'll tell you. Now, I was thinking, though, would it help us all feel a little bit better if we would just count how many days it was until the first day of winter? Well, I don't know if that makes me necessarily feel any better, but it does bring a little bit more of a coolness to your mind thinking about that. Well, nevertheless, glad to have you here on our program today. This is episode 174. If you missed something, you can go to our podcast site at workingranchradio.com, or you can find us on any podcast provider out there as well. By the way, we appreciate if you'd leave some comments. That's always helpful, or a thumbs up or a like, whatever you want to do on that. That's helpful for us as well. Well, joining us here on our program today is a good friend of mine. In fact, we've known each other now for quite a while. Dates clear back to our days at the University of Wyoming. Dr. Steve Paisley, who is now the director of the University of Wyoming Sarek Research Center, located in Lingle, Wyoming. And if you're not familiar with where Lingle, Wyoming is kind of pretty close to the Nebraska border, but it's kind of in the southeastern corner of Wyoming. So, Dr. Paisley, good to have you here. And I know you've been on the program before, and glad to have you back.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you today, and I'm a definite follower of the program, so looking forward to it.
Well, good. We appreciate you representing the town of Lingle, Wyoming, or Wheatland, Wyoming, being our listener there. So anyway, let's talk about our subject at hand here today. It's interesting because, boy, it just seemed like as we headed into July, the weather really has played a pretty instrumental role in some of the talk here lately. Not only is the market good, but then this weather sure seemed to dry things out. There are a few exceptions across the country where they have had pretty good moisture, but when we see this turn in the weather and starting to dry things out, you really start to then put in your mind as far as, okay, how are these cows doing? How are our cows doing nutritional wise? And I know that's kind of down your aisle of expertise, which is why I wanted to bring you on here on the show here today. So when we find ourselves in midsummer, we got folks, as you and I talked before we went on air, we've got folks in all different areas of the cycle with their cattle. We've got folks that are yet to put bulls out. We've got folks that have probably even pulled bulls out of their cattle. And so with that, nevertheless, midsummer nutrition is something that we really need to step back and think about just a little bit. And it's something that you felt is important as well.
That's exactly right. And we've run into a dry year. I realize the program has a national reach and everybody's in a different situation, but here at our research station, we currently have our weather data shows we've received 3 inches of total precipitation since January 1st for us, and that includes snowfall and everything. So we're in a little, I guess, a dry spot right here, and drought and managing forage resources is pretty front and center in a lot of our thoughts here right now.
So I think with any of us, we're looking at as we go out and we're driving around through the pastures where we're moving cows, we're getting water set up ahead of bunches of cows that are coming in. We're looking at that forage that's out there and understanding what we have in that. And really, that's part of the thing that we need to be looking at. What do we have out there existingly wise? What is it given to these cows? What do we need to be looking at there, do you feel?
I believe as we look at, especially in our rotational grazing systems, we have to be aware of forage not only behind us, but ahead of us, and making sure we're rotating accordingly. I think that's a pretty important decision to make as we go through this. The other is we look at there, in our case, a lot of our forage is no longer green. We've already dried off, and we've got basically what's out there is all we're going to get for this year. So we have gone out, we've measured existing forage standing crop out there and trying to make those management decisions accordingly. So certainly forage quantity is something that we're thinking about, but also forage quality and some of those things that are associated with that as forages work towards maturity, our protein levels begin to decline and our phosphorus levels begin to decline. So forage quality is also changing as that forage begins to mature and turn brown on us.
One of the things I've always said this, if you could really graze your operation perfectly, you would have 20 times or 50 times your total herd that you're running on your place for about 1 week, right? Because you've got a lot of crested wheat that comes up, and it's good for a period of time, and then after that it really starts to brown out, and the cows definitely don't like it. However, as we look at that and we say, okay, it is what it is, so we have to rotate through those. Is there still value in that forage that has browned out later on or winter use? What are you finding with that?
There is definitely value in that forage, and it's a great forage resource. However, if we think about, in the life cycle of that grass, when it's green and actively growing, kind of the vegetative stage before it's shot out a seed head, we're looking at grasses that are, upwards of 12 to 15 16% protein. As they mature, as they brown off, that forage protein drops down into the 6-7% range. And as we move, closer to winter and closer to late fall, that can drop even lower down in the 4 and 5% range. If we think about a range cow, typically she can manage quite well on forages. She can digest those forages as long as that protein level is in the 7% range and up. That's not necessarily her protein requirements, but her ability to digest that forage, we need to have at least 7% protein in that overall diet to achieve that. So managing that accordingly is pretty important.
One of the comments that you made to me before we went on air here was that we can't supplement out of a drought. And at the same time, there's maybe some assistance that should we be looking at. How do we put that into perspective to economically handle that so that we're not, spending so much that we're not making it back on the tail end of that? But how do we handle, from your perspective, these times? Grass is tougher. Grass is not giving quite the nutritional needs that we had before. What's your thoughts in terms of bringing in some element of a supplement to help them with that?
I think that mineral supplementation is a key component to that as we look at these conditions. And I typically think mineral supplementation is important year-round, obviously, but we need to kind of focus on key times. Certainly, calving through rebreeding is a key time to focus on your mineral program. And in many cases, if we've got some May and June calving herds that haven't even put bulls in yet, providing that mineral supplementation and making sure we're providing a balanced diet is pretty important. The other thing to think about as we move into later summer and consider weaning options, making sure we've got that mineral provided to those cattle as we move into the weaning phase. Managing that calf health through our mineral program is pretty important as well. So mineral is a part of that. And then just knowing what the forage quality is out there, standing forage, we can boost performance a little by strategic protein supplementation if we've got that available forage. My caution there is if we've got limited forage, if we're in a dry situation and we've got a limited amount of grass out there, providing that protein supplement in some cases will increase forage intake. And that's maybe not the plan we need to to use in those cases where we've got limited forage.
That's a good thought there. I wasn't considering that element of it until you mentioned that, but that's kind of the point of how much protein supplementation you look at, is whether you've got the available forage or whether you're droughted out. Now, like in our particular case where I'm located at here in northeastern Wyoming, we actually had a pretty good abundance of rain in May that built us a fairly decent grass base. I wouldn't say it's the best grass year we've had, but it's by far not the worst. And so in that particular case, what you're saying is, with the grass available, it could be something to look at a protein supplement. From that standpoint, if you have the grass base there and you're looking at protein supplements, what have you found to be some good options? I'm not necessarily looking at particular names, but maybe some types of products that you found to be good range supplementation for protein.
If we can keep in mind pricing things on a per pound of important nutrient, in our case, pricing those things out on a per pound of protein, if that's what we're needing to supplement, and keeping some of those things in mind, there's a lot of different options out there, but probably looking at something that is self-fed. Lick tubs will certainly work well in those situations. I've even seen operations that can, if you can get to them and put out some liquid supplement tubs, those also work. Sometimes access and getting a truck out to them is difficult, but those work as well. And the old protein blocks still work well. In many cases, we're trying to distribute cattle over a wider area. And so those protein blocks, protein tubs, all of those tend to help us do that. Not only do they provide that and needed protein, but it also helps us redistribute those cows and get some of those grass that we're trying to chase out there and getting them to move around a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, Steve, let's take a break here. When we come back, folks, we're going to talk a little bit more about this as we're talking midsummer nutrition. We were just leaving off there about if you're in a situation with maybe you have more grass this year than not. And so what happens, though, if you're in an area where you're stocked up plenty high, or you're wanting to conserve that grass? How do we manage that? How do we be strategic in managing that going forward? We're going to talk about that when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. This segment today brought to you by K-Line Irrigation, a cost-effective adaptive irrigation solution designed specifically with the grass-based livestock producer in mind. To find out more, you can go to their website at k-linena.com.
This year, choose to unlock the full potential of your cattle operation with K-Line Irrigation, the affordable and dynamic solution for grass-based livestock operations. Beat drought by planning ahead with the most user-friendly irrigation system. K-Line systems ensure optimal water distribution across all acres and are unencumbered by obstacles such as fence lines or steep terrain. Don't miss out on untapped pasture potential. Choose K-Line to secure the future of your grazing operation. For more information, visit our website at www.k-linena.com. Be sure to fill out a consultation form so our designers can create an estimate for your project. K-Line Irrigation, for greener, more productive pastures anywhere.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. When it comes to agriculture real estate, there's definitely not a shortage of folks in that business. And all they really want to do is pretty much market your asset. But what there is a shortage of are folks that can sit down with you right there at the kitchen table across the bed of your pickup and bring a multifaceted approach to the future of your land asset. Now, while selling might be what you're considering, have you thought about all your options? What about having someone guide you through leasing or ranch management? Wouldn't you want someone with expertise, experience, reputation, and integrity providing you with the best options that will help you and your family make some crucial decisions that you will feel confident about for the future? Well, in 1946, Henry Hall and his son Warren founded Hall Mortgage Company. And now, 78 years later, known as Hall & Hall, it truly is one of the most diverse companies in the country that work in agriculture real estate. With listings all throughout the United States and Canada, they're multifaceted in their ability to broker real estate, of course, but also provide long-term financing for buyers. appraisals and brokerage or auction services for landowners, but yet they still have a desire to see land stay in production agriculture, whether it's the current ranch family owners or new buyers. Hall & Hall can assist with the day-to-day operations to hiring or lease negotiations. Now, I've known and worked with the folks at Hall & Hall for nearly 25 years myself, and I trust that they will guide you through the next steps that you may be considering regarding your ranch operation. If you go to their website at hallhall.com, not only can you find more information about all of their services, but you also see a phrase up there in the corner that I think speaks volumes about the depth of the company and the people you will work with at Hall & Hall. It says, dedicated to the land and landowners since 1946. Find out more. You can go to their website again. It's hallhall.com. Well, as we continue on now, my guest today is Dr. Steve Paisley. He's the director of the University of Wyoming Sarek Research Center, located in Lingle, Wyoming, and we're talking midsummer nutrition in the last segment, specifically talking about just looking at what we have, the existing forage of what we're going to be looking at for the rest of this summer, and understanding what that is giving, what it's not giving, and providing the importance of maintaining that mineral supplementation throughout the year through these cow herds. That's important as always. And then as we left off, we were talking about maybe you would look at protein supplement if you had the forage available. But Dr. Paisley, some places maybe don't have the forage available for two reasons. One, they're stocked heavy, so they're wanting to conserve grass. Maybe they have the grass, but they want to conserve it. Or there's places that just never got the rain to have grass to start with. So from that standpoint, it's pretty important that we are pretty strategic in the management of that grass going forward through the rest of this summer.
That's exactly right. And many of your podcasts have addressed kind of a diversified operation where maybe you've got a group of yearlings, maybe marketing those yearlings a little bit earlier than you normally do and trying to conserve some grass that way. Also, I think an opportunity to consider early weaning or maybe early preg testing your cows and maybe strategically weaning some of those cows. Maybe your open cows, maybe you can do a little deeper cull on your cows, picking those cows that are older, maybe have some flaws that are beginning to develop, and maybe strategically weaning a portion of the herd that you can move those calves off the cow and market those cows early. We're looking at a relatively good market for cull cows right now, or cull animals. But I do think, strategically weaning, strategically preg testing, looking at some of those things to reduce your herd size and still maintain that core herd or that base herd.
Yeah. And it was interesting, something that's the BQA is really focused on, and that's this cull cow market and getting these cull cows moved off the place. Some of them still might have a calf at their side. Some of them maybe don't. But right now, this cull market, just as the calf market is very good, this cull market is as good as we've ever seen. It's a good time to really thin down this herd.
Yeah, exactly right. And if we can preg test those cows early and maybe market those cows and avoid that seasonal low for a cull cow market standpoint. So you try and capitalize as much as we can on those opportunities. So typically we see cull cow prices dip in October, November, early December. If we can market those cows maybe in August, mid to late August into September, market them early, it's a good way to reduce that forage need off of the ranch and capitalize on some really good prices right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's for sure. Is there anything else from a strategic management standpoint that you can think of? We talked about maybe early weaning, also getting rid of some of these cull cows. Is there anything else from a strategic management standpoint that comes to mind when we look at this in terms of trying to handle this midsummer nutritional element and thinking about, how do we conserve grass?
I think another option is, as you manage that herd, if you are weaning, again, I think strategically weaning those cows and evaluating that situation. Maybe you don't wean all of your calves at once. Maybe you've got the ability to focus on weaning those younger cows, those older cows in poor condition. Maybe focus on weaning those calves early and maintaining some condition on those cows. That's an opportunity to look at. Maybe sorting the herd and being able to manage two different herds. Maybe you've got a set of cows that maybe have a little bit higher nutrient needs than the others, your young cows, thin cows, something like that. Managing those in a couple of different groups might be another opportunity to consider as you move into dry conditions. I think there's a lot of different options out there, and just kind of thinking through some of those things, and I think we'll talk a little bit about later, making some of those decisions and realizing some of the long-term impacts of those decisions as you move forward.
Yeah. Steve, you talked a little bit about weaning calves. That brought up to my mind a question for you, and that is, maybe this year, do we even wean calves? Now, I've had every time I have Clint Berry on the show, who's with Superior Livestock, I always ask him, is it worth weaning calves? Is it worth weaning calves? Because I think there's always a push. Definitely the buyer wants a weaned calf. There's no question about that. But when we look at where we're at and trying to conserve and have forage, one of the things that sticks in my head in my conversation with Clint was the fact that if you've got the feed resources, then you might want to go ahead and consider weaning a calf. But if you don't, it's probably not worth it. Don't try to do something you don't have the resources for. What's your thoughts this year? Is this something, you really would need to put a pencil to that, see whether or not it's worth weaning?
I've actually done that on my own personal operation, and I had the same thoughts, and I do a similar thing. I think that years where calf prices are high, I think you need to pencil that. I think you need to look at that, because I think there's less of a discount on when there's a demand for those calves. I think there's a less of a discount for those calves that are directly off of the cow. So I agree. Everybody cringes a little bit about thinking about some of that, but that's exactly right. Looking at some of those options and those opportunities, and just evaluating your current situation, and put a pencil to it. Look at basically a kind of a budget, and see where those opportunities lie.
Yeah. Well, and I think it gets back to what we started this segment with, is strategic management. As we look at this, through my education and going through, Ranching for Profit, there was a drought management plan. One of those is, what animals can we get rid of first? And you knew what those animals were. And that's going to change from year to year, because I think you got to reconsider where the market's at, just as you were talking a little bit ago about that. And it might be worth it to get rid of these calves a little sooner and keep a few more cows back.
I think so, because if you look at cattle inventory numbers, there's still a projected decline or a continued decrease in U.S. herd inventory, which makes me think that we are still in the middle of that high price cycle part of the cattle phase, of the cow cycle. Whereas if we can keep those cows in the herd, she has a pretty good chance of remaining profitable for us over the next 4 to 5 years, just looking at where we're at in that cattle cycle. So exactly, holding on to those cows and those productive cows in your herd might be a good time to consider doing that.
And I think the key part that you just said there was productive cows. And, I'll tell you one thing, and this kind of goes against some of the stuff that I've, have gone through. I mentioned a little bit ago about Ranching for Profit and some of those kinds of things, but I'm actually going to keep some cows that came in dry this year. That's not something I would typically do. We talked about that coal cow market being hot right now. Typically, we'd load them up and we'd take them to the sale barn here in July. However, if I kind of weigh them out, condition-wise, age-wise, and I look at them, but I'm kind of considering, if she can be a productive cow, now I'm taking a risk with her, I'm probably going to keep her one more year.
That's exactly, I've done a similar thing, and I've learned from my mistakes, at least on my own operation, to where I made some short-term decisions on nutrition and cows, and I kept some open cows because I considered it my fault and not necessarily that cow's fault, to where I let conditions slip in the cows. I let them get to the point where a productive cow kind of had a hiccup in her productive lifetime. And so I've got a similar situation. I've got 20 cows or so that I'm deciding that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt this year.
Yeah. And I think that's the element of ranching that's the management part of it, is we can't just get locked into, this is what we do every year all the time. You really got to take into every element that's going on around your operation and make those decisions accordingly.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take another break here. My guest today is Dr. Steve Paisley, Director of University of Wyoming Sarek Research Center in Lingle. When we come back, we're going to continue to talk. He touched on it briefly. We're going to go into it a little bit deeper, making short-term decisions that could have long-term impacts. We'll talk about that next on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Now, as we head to break, and it might be something for you to want to do as well, why don't you head to the coffee pot and get refilled? It's what I'm going to do. Before we got started here today, I've brewed up a fresh pot of Cowpuncher coffee. It's what we drink here at the X-Ring Ranch as well as the Working Ranch Radio Show studios. You can choose from several different varieties of flavors of coffee that they have. Give Jim or Trish Williams a call and check them out. Go to their website at cowpunchercoffee.com. Grab a mug and let's spur the day with Cow Puncher Coffee. Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. You know, there's a lot of talk about the importance these days of probiotics in equine health, but you know, not all probiotics are created equal. You got to check out the new Purina Systemic Supplement. It remains live and active even after the pelleting process and then throughout the whole digestive system as it makes its way all the way into that hind gut. Now, Systemic was designed to support normal recovery after exercise and then the occasional gastrointestinal stress. Now, whether you're using a probiotic now or not, it's time to use a live and active supplement from a name you trust. Check out new Purina's Systemic Probiotic. Well, as we turn back to our program here today, my guest is Dr. Steve Paisley with the University of Wyoming's Research Center. And Dr. Paisley, we've had a good discussion already so far. And in the last segment, we were talking strategic management. You had brought up just briefly there, we were talking about keeping some of these open good cows back in our herd. I know that defies some of the management theories that are out there that people would talk over from year over year. But as we said before we went to break, you kind of have to look at all the elements in the market, in the universe going on right now around your ranch to make some of these decisions. You'd made a phrase there about short-term decisions having long-term impacts. I want you to expand on that just a little bit.
I think we run into this scenario, especially during dry years, because a lot of things compound themselves during dry years. And this will apply to many ranches or many situations. But in the case of a dry year for us, we're looking at increasing costs, for example. So a lot of times we'll make short-term decisions. So we look at dry conditions, what's coming up, and we're looking at what's in our checking account. And so we start to manage things according to those short-term decisions, whether it's mineral program, whether it's a supplement program, whether it's buying hay. A lot of those things will make a short-term decisions because we don't think we're just hesitant to spend money on the herd at that particular time. And I think those types of decisions can have a long-term impact on the herd that will impact certainly the calf crop that's produced, but the subsequent rebreeding rate of those cows. So a short-term decision on choose not to maybe provide the same mineral program that you always have done. You choose to not do the same supplement program as far as protein supplement through the fall and winter. All of those things can impact cow condition, can impact the development of that calf that's in utero at that time, and can have long-term fertility impacts on your herd.
Mm-hmm. And that's interesting you brought that up because I think it was just a couple of weeks ago. In fact, I think it was episode 172 back around the middle of June where we did a show on fetal programming. And this is that time. What you're saying is kind of essentially that, is that we can do some things to our herd that in the short term might save us a buck or two. Down the road, we could be impacting the future replacements on our operation. Is there anything else that you hear from folks? I know you get a lot of phone calls on that as you are talking with them about the decisions that they're making, maybe short-term decisions that you think could have those long-term impacts.
Probably the best example, and I'm sure that was addressed in your program earlier, but that calf that's developing in utero, there's quite a bit of data, Nebraska data, that would suggest that you can have impact on the long-term fertility of that heifer calf that's in utero at that time. And we've seen actual proof of that working with ranches in Wyoming to where we'll get a set of heifer calves that come in and maybe we're only got 55-60% of those heifer calves bred. And we do some backtracking. We think about what happened. And many times we can relate that back to a management decision during late gestation in that cow, mid to late gestation on that cow. So again, fetal development in that cow and developing all of those systems in that developing fetus are pretty important to think about. And again, those short-term decisions can have long-term impact, not only on that cow's ability to rebreed, but that developing heifer calf you can have big impacts on that heifer calf as well. Certainly there are impacts on the steer calf as well, but I think as cow-calf producers and as range operations that rely on replacement heifer, that can have a big impact on the operation as well.
Mm-hmm. So, Steve, I know we're finding ourselves here right smack in the middle of the summertime, but And you kind of already alluded to it a little bit, maybe in our first segment. But let's think ahead. Let's start working ahead. I know you said yourself, you're already now preparing for the winter months through getting protein placed, supplement or feed placed, and those kinds of things. We're thinking about fall and winter. We yet don't know exactly what that's going to have in store for us in terms of the severity or the impact of the winter months. So how do we strategically plan for these fall and those winter months with this cow herd right now, where we have a little time to be planning on that? What should we be doing?
I think managing your costs as much as possible. So in my case, that's pricing in protein supplement for the winter. Purchasing hay right now, there's still, in my mind, I could be wrong. I was wrong last year. But looking at hay prices and maybe work with someone and kind of forecast where those hay prices are headed. If there's the ability to lock in some hay, just strategically planning for the winter months where you're at. In my case, I need to plan a little bit ahead because I need to think about fall and winter grazing and what those opportunities are for us. I think that's important to think about, making a plan to strategically wean at this time right now. Maybe you can consider a mid to late August wean, possibly if you have bulls in currently, maybe pulling those bulls a little bit early, and that helps you make some of those management decisions and focus on those early breeding cows. All of those things are things to consider at this point in time if you're looking at dry conditions.
Yeah. Well, let's take another break here. My guest today is Dr. Steve Paisley with the University of Wyoming. And in our final segment with him, we're going to talk kind of on the outside of midsummer nutrition that has been the theme of our show here today. But we're going to talk a little bit about replacements and the selection of those replacements. That's all part of that a little bit. It's kind of on the outer throes of that conversation. We'll get into that when we come back here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Before we take a break, this segment today brought to you by the American Gelbvieh Association. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics. Find out more at gelbvieh.org.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelbvieh and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer-influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer Genetics.
Welcome back to the Working Ranch Radio Show. My guest today is Dr. Steve Paisley. He's the director of the University of Wyoming Sorek Research Center in Lingle, Wyoming. And we're talking specifically, the overarching theme here today is midsummer nutrition. We've talked everything from analyzing and looking at our forage to strategic management in that, and then also that we're not making short-term decisions that could have some long-term impacts. A lot of very practical dialogue that we've had here as well. Steve, I want to go a little bit kind of on a side area. It does pertain to nutrition, because when we start talking nutrition, the basis of this is, for all of us, is we want cows that are efficient with what they're on in the environment that they're in. And I know that's something that's big in what you're doing, and part of the research that you guys have continued to work on too is looking at the selection. We are in a point in time, as you had mentioned previously, where we are seeing the lowest numbers in our cattle herd. And so we're going to start to see these numbers grow. You touched just a moment ago before we went to break about fetal program and having good nutrition in these calves and these cows, because we know that it can affect them later on for those that become our replacements in our herd. So let's talk about selection and the importance of that and looking at this feed efficiency in these cattle, because at the end of the day, that's really what I know for a lot of us that are running, range type operations. Boy, we got to have cows that can perform in the environment that they're in and do it economically and efficiently. What's your thoughts?
We have a feed efficiency testing facility here at the station, and so feed efficiency a lot, and nutrition. Of course, I'm a nutritionist, and so I liken that. My comment to that is when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And when you're a nutritionist, everything revolves around feed and nutrition, right? And I tend to fall into that category. But one of the things we have here is we measure feed efficiency in a lot of breeding stock for producers around the area. And I think that's, as we move forward, as we make those long-term decisions, something that we continue to focus on and need to focus on is feed efficiency and looking at the efficiency of our base cow herd. And I think for those out there that look at that, these efficiency numbers are available on about every sire and about everything that we look at when we make those breeding decisions and those purchasing decisions. That information is available. And the other thing is, on our own herd, as we make culling decisions, production efficiency is a big part of that, right? What makes a cow efficient in our own herd? Well, it's a cow that produces a live calf that weans a high percentage of her mature body weight as a weaned calf and continues to breed back for us. Those are those efficient cows in our herd. And certainly feed efficiency is a part of that production efficiency equation, but fertility and the survivability of that cow, longevity of that cow is a part of that production efficiency equation as well.
Mm-hmm. I want to hit on two things that you just talked about there. First was on the sires, and then we'll get into the cow efficiency question after that. Let's talk about the sire side of things, because as you had said, we definitely start to see more of those numbers, more of that talk in our industry now than we probably saw maybe 15 years ago. Not that they weren't talking about it, but we definitely it's kind of one of the cliches in the bull selling business right now is, feed efficiency and all of that in amongst other EPD numbers that we're looking at. So when we talk about feed efficiency, is there anything, as you have seen this evolve more and more in our industry and become a key point in it, is there anything that just maybe a concern that you're seeing from the sire side of things that they're pushing this? Are we getting relevant data there that's really giving us true, accurate numbers on that feed efficiency when we see these numbers coming, when we get our bull sale catalogs in the fall and in the spring? Do you feel confident in the numbers we're getting?
I feel really confident in the feed efficiency numbers, but I think they need to be used in the correct context. So we have RFI data or RADG data. We have some efficiency measurement, but that needs to be kind of measured in the correct context. So in other words, I would continue to look at average daily gain and performance, future performance of those animals, and look at those criteria that maybe you always look at, those maternal criteria. If you're looking at, a bull, using a bull for herd replacements, those types of things. I think feed efficiency is key, but again, you have to keep it in the right context and the right framework as a component to that selection criteria that you use.
Because one of the things I bring that up, and the reason I bring that up, I guess, is because everybody's saying that. Mm-hmm. So does everybody have it?
I guess an example that I can use here is, as we test bulls routinely here, year round here. We always have a set of bulls on test here at the station. And my oversimplistic comment is that we can have bulls that are extremely efficient and maybe have similar RFI numbers, but are efficient in two different ways. We can have an efficient bull that eats a very small amount of feed and has average performance. And then we can also have an equally efficient bull that has a very high feed intake, but an extremely high performance. So we have a bull that, in my mind, we have the same efficiency numbers on two bulls that achieve that efficiency in two different ways. Mm-hmm. So we have a bull that, and maybe this is my rancher math, I guess, to some extent, but
okay.
But if I've got a herd of cows that are on a limited forage environment, I want an efficient bull that has a low feed intake, but maintains an adequate or average or above average performance. That's the efficiency that I'm looking for. But if I own a feedlot, I want that bull that has extremely high intake and an ultra high performance, right? So in ways, those efficiency are two different things. Yeah. And I think looking at that efficiency numbers just out of context, just RFI by itself maybe doesn't tell the full story.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I hadn't thought about it that way. So that's helpful for me to think about, because I think for a lot of us from a range perspective, we want more of that low intake, yet we still want a big calf though too, so there's that balance, which is what we've all been striving for, is the balance in this whole deal from the beginning. Let's talk about the cow. you had talked a little bit about production efficiency and looking at, we want to keep these replacements off of cows that have been efficient, both efficient in calves that they're still making a calf. That's one big thing right there. And then at the same time, similar to what we were talking about with the bulls, we also want some cows that are low input, high output. Isn't that kind of essentially what we're looking for? So when we talk about that high output, what are some goals or some benchmark, I guess that you would say, when we're talking about a cow weaning weight that we would want off these calves? What are kind of some benchmarks that you'd say, well, okay, here's a cow that's highly efficient, highly productive? Any benchmark numbers you could throw out?
Well, we look at our herd here at the station. We have the luxury of knowing our cow size. We weigh our cows. Mm-hmm. Here, when they come through the chute, every chute has a scale under it. We weigh our cows. That's the other thing that we're not going to have time to get into. That's another soapbox we can climb up on and talk about cow size as it continues to creep higher and higher. But we look at weaning calf weight as a percentage of that mature cow size. So in our case, we're hoping for something that's in the 52 to 55% of mature cow weight size from a weaning weight standpoint. So if you've got a 1,200 pound cow, which not many of those exist anymore. If you've got a 1,200 pound cow, you want a 650 pound weaning weight on that calf to 700 pound. I mean, that's a benchmark or a ballpark that you can make. I've also worked with ranches that want some kind of criteria of that, and basically we've looked at an adjusted weaning weight, at least coming up with an adjusted weaning weight for those calves once they're weaned. And so an adjusted weaning weight would factor in the birth date of the calf, as well as cow age, to try and make an even playing field for those cows.
Yeah.
So looking at an adjusted weaning weight's another way to kind of approach that when you don't have a mature weight on those cows.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I think it's something that when we look at things, it's hard for some of us to really want to get wrapped up in the numbers, but I think if we can look at and put some numbers to some of this, it would help us in our selection process. Really, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, we're always eternal optimists, and so we'll see a big 650 pound calf walk through, and you're like, well, what? Oh, I know the cow that produced that. She always produces a big calf. Well, that cow may weigh 1,800 pounds, right? Yeah. So we tend to focus on the data that we like to look at, and so kind of using those numbers, we continue to use those types of numbers to make some of those selection decisions in our herd.
Yeah. And I don't remember where I heard this. I don't know if it was on one of our shows here or if it was somebody else, but they kept saying, weigh your cows. Weigh your cows. That's important, isn't it?
It is. And I tell you what, as a producer, and I do a lot of AI work in my own commercial herd, and I also purchase cleanup bulls for our herd. I've got a 3-breed rotation, kind of a composite herd that I'm trying to build, and finding those highly productive bulls that are low to moderate frame size are nearly impossible to find. Mm-hmm. So keeping all of those kind of criteria in mind, it's really difficult. Obviously, it's easy to chase weaning weight and some of those production type criteria, but trying to factor in mature frame size and some of those other things, boy, you kind of get caught in the momentum and you find yourself continuing to increase frame size when in many cases, I think that's something we need to manage for is frame size.
Yes. Well, and I know on the tip of your tongue was there's a balance in there, but in some of that, I mean, and I think that's, again, what we're all striving for is that we're all striving for that perfect cow, right? So are all the guys selling bulls. They're striving for the perfect bull. So, Dr. Paisley, before we go, just maybe some final comments from you about our subject here today. I know we started with midsummer nutrition, then we kind of got into selection here in the last segment, but just some final comments from you.
Yeah, and I realize you've got a wide audience, and I hope we provided some ideas or some management things that you can kind of stick in your back pocket and use when those times are appropriate. And I think really it's a time to be really optimistic about our industry. I think there's a lot of challenges out there, obviously, and a lot of things that we have to work through on a daily basis. But focusing on those long-term decisions with the idea that there's opportunities in this beef industry, and we just got to focus on the long term and keep working for those opportunities.
You bet. All right. Well, Dr. Paisley, thanks for joining us here today on the Working Ranch Radio Show.
You bet. I've enjoyed it.
You bet. And again, my guest today, Dr. Steve Paisley, joining us here on the program from the University of Wyoming. As he had said earlier, and I want to reiterate that, I hope our discussion here today has prompted some thoughts and thinking as you look ahead, managing throughout the rest of this summer and looking ahead into the fall and winter months. Well, stay with us. When we come back, the Captain Tim O'Byrne is in for this week's edition of Tim's 2 Cents.
Looking for the perfect gift for a gardener or weather enthusiast? Introducing the Tropo, a precision rain gauge that has revolutionized both reliability and convenience. Expertly engineered by meteorologists, the Tropo gauge boasts rugged durability, impeccable accuracy, and precision to the 100th of an inch. Visit measurerain.com to order a Tropo today and use code RAINDAY. That's RAINDAY for free shipping and 10% off. Go to measurerain.com.
Hey, Justin. Hey, everybody out there in Working Ranch Radio Land. It is so hot down here in the Southwest. I seen a saguaro cactus hitchhiking northbound the other day on I-15. Justin, the Peterson Farm brothers, everybody's heard of them by now. Those young fellas are just amazing. They are just such pillars of the community, ambassadors for agriculture deluxe, and educators and inspirations to so many people. And they did a post here the other day, and it's very, very important. We have to remember this at all times and train ourselves to do this on these rural roads. The corn's really high. Coming up to the corners, they're recommending stop at every corner and have a look both ways, because you just never know what you're going to see. You can't see the dust. You can't see anything coming. Play it safe out there. There was numerous responses to that post on their Facebook page, and one of them was obviously an EMS individual that said, we've come to far too many of those wrecks at intersections like that on the rural roads. Take it easy out there. When you come up to the corner and you can't see around it, stop and have a look before you proceed. Back to you, Justin.
All right, thanks, Captain. Some good advice there, and I think really comes down to just be patient. You know, I think in our world today, we have a tendency to just be wrapped up so much in what we're doing that we kind of lose a little bit of common sense and what all's going on. And in fact, speaking of losing common sense, a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, I should say, I brought home I had bought at an auction a pretty good sized shed. It was about 16 by 24 foot shed. It fit on my trailer. So I went ahead and put it on there and was going to bring it home. Well, I had a flagger in front and a flagger behind, and we went on a secondary highway, but it wasn't too long before a highway patrolman showed up and had wanted to know if I had a permit. Well, I had a farm exemption, so I didn't have to necessarily have a permit. And we had all of our wide load signs, and I had flaggers both in front and behind. And as people were coming up behind us, we were pulling off and letting them go by because there was just really no way to get around. And I didn't want to hold up people's time and everything by letting them get stacked up behind us. So we were doing a pretty good job. And so the highway patrolman made a comment to me that, somebody had called in that there was somebody slowing down traffic on the highway, and that he had come out to check it out. And thought it was interesting for two reasons. It wasn't us that was causing it. It was actually a farmer that had a tractor, hay and equipment going down the road. But I just thought it was, in a way, kind of where has our society gone a little bit when we have people calling and complaining about slowing up traffic when it really wasn't critical in anything, and just a little element of common sense and just kind of stepping back and thinking about where things will go and being patient on the roads that we're traveling on, and knowing that it's somebody's loved ones like yourself that are out on the roads, and we want to all survive at the end of the day. So let's take a break. When we come back, you're going to want to tune in, because I'll tell you what we're working on for upcoming shows here on the Working Ranch Radio Show. Some very exciting ones, and I'm excited to bring those to you. I think they're very practical, very applicable. So tune in. We'll be right back after this. This segment today brought to you by Tank Toad, your remote water monitoring from the convenience, all from your phone, powered by solar, satellite, and cell. You can keep an eye on your water supply with a daily text message. Call Meadowlark Solutions today for tank monitors, well controllers, generators, and more, even to turn on or off your electric vents. A lot of different options. Check them out. TankToad.com is the website. You can give them a call at 801-252-6135.
Capitalize on crossbreeding with Gelb V and Balancer bulls. Raise replacement females with added fertility, increased longevity, and greater productivity. Gelbvieh and Balancer influenced females wean more pounds of calf per cow exposed. In the feed yard, Balancer influenced cattle offer increased performance, improved feed efficiency, and have excellent carcass merit. Balancers add the pounds, make the grade, and deliver the value. Make your crossbreeding count with Gelbvieh and Balancer genetics.
What if your commercial beef herd could be better than you thought possible? Genetic testing can help give you more confidence about what your herd is made of, and more importantly, what it can be. Inherit Select from Zoetis provides data-driven genetic insights to help you make more informed selection, breeding, and culling decisions about your cows and heifers. The journey from genetic potential to reality begins with Inherit Select. Ask a genetics rep how to save on testing with our whole herd promotion. Go to beefgenetics.com/radio.
This year, choose to unlock the full potential of your cattle operation with K-Line Irrigation, the affordable and dynamic solution for grass-based livestock operations. Beat drought by planning ahead with the most user-friendly irrigation system. K-Line systems ensure optimal water distribution across all acres and are unencumbered by obstacles such as fence lines or steep terrain. Don't miss out on untapped pasture potential. Choose K-Line to secure the future of your grazing operation. For more information, visit our website at www.k-linena.com. Be sure to fill out a consultation form so our designers can create an estimate for your project. K-Line Irrigation, for greener, more productive pastures anywhere.
Well, I'm excited to bring to you the next few shows that we're going to have here on the program, so I invite you to stay and tune in next week and the following week after that, because I think there's a lot of practicality in what we're going to be talking about with them. Now, we've had on the program here before the Society for Range Management, folks on that, and Dave Voth has been a guest with us. He's also with their Good Grazing Makes Sense initiative, and if you subscribe to their e-blast that they kick out, you probably already have read the one where they are reviewing different apps that grazing or that ranch managers could be used regarding grazing. And I thought that would be very applicable. We're going to be reviewing those. Plus, they have some more apps that he has reviewed. He's going to share with us the information on that, what apps to use, maybe some to not use. And some of those you might have already used or be using, and some you probably haven't heard about. So I invite you to tune in, listen to us on that for that show. Dave Voth with the Society for Range Management and Good Grazing Makes Sense. We'll be talking about what apps to use, and maybe some apps aren't quite as useful as they could be. So that'll be a great show I think you'll enjoy. Also coming up, we're going to be visiting with Galen from the American Grazing Lands. Now, the American Grazing Lands is Jim Garish's entity, his consulting business, as well as his retail business where they sell a lot of electric fence type supplies. Now, they deal and work with a lot of producers all across the country, and I thought it'd be good to sit down and visit with Galen about what's being used out there. Everything from building permanent electric fence to portable electric fence, all of the gadgets, the latest widgets and insulators and posts and fence and all the things that you might be considering or looking at or maybe hadn't thought about. So I think you'll find that show very practical as well. So be sure to tune in on the upcoming editions of the Working Ranch Radio Show. By the way, the Working Ranch Radio Show is a production of Working Ranch Magazine, branded #1 by America's Ranchers, and the summer edition is already out. In fact, they're working on that September issue currently, and I'll tell you, if you do not have a subscription, first of all, it's really easy. You can go to workingranchmag.com and you can get it started, but you're missing out because every issue is always packed full with a lot of great information, a lot of great and useful stories that are in there for working ranches just like yours, and I encourage you to take a look for yourself. Go to workingranchmag.com and you can get your subscription started today. Now, if you'd like to get a hold of me, you can send me an email at justin.workingranch@gmail.com. Be sure to leave us a review. We'd appreciate that as well. Join us next week, same time, same place, or on your favorite podcast provider. I'm Justin Mills, and until next time, keep your chin down and your mind in the middle. So long.